big welcome to Ed Lees from Wild Farmed. Lots of consumers want to see a change in the food system, and there was a large piece of research published in August last year that found over half of us want to change our diet to make it more environmentally friendly, and nearly 70% think the government should be doing more to encourage more sustainable diets. So along with his business partners Andy Cato and George Lamb, Ed founded Wild Farm in 2018. Prior to that, Ed was working in financial markets and investments for more than 20 years. His route to wild farming stemmed from a conversation with his friend George, to the point he was looking for a change and to do something that contributed more to society. So he left the role at the equity derivatives broker Sunrise to help realise the vision. I mean, amazing. Wild Farm's trying to create a market for farmers that rewards the quality of their crop, soils and ecosystems. So they're creating a community of bakeries, restaurants, producers, people that want to fix food and fix the planet. So welcome, Ed, and thanks ever so much for joining us this morning. I've been excited about this for a while.
Thanks, Mel.
Pleasure. So can I start with a really big question, please?
Yeah.
What is Wild Farmed?
Wow, that is a big question.
I know, sorry.
Yeah, you did a bit of it there. So what is Wild Farm? It's an end-to-end, fully transparent supply chain that is connecting farmers, food businesses, and consumers to be a part of the problem to the biggest issue that we face today, which is climate change and feeding the world.
How did it come about? I mean, I've sort of talked.
This is a long story, so I'm going to do it quickly, or it'll take the whole meeting.
No problem.
17 years ago, my co-founder Andy, who was working as a musician at the time, was on his way back from a gig, and he came across an article about modern agriculture. And at the end of the article, a brilliant bit of journalism, it said, "If you don't like the system, don't depend on it." And his response to that was to start growing food for his family when he was living in southwest France. And the moment his first seed germinated, he thought, why isn't this the first thing and last thing we're taught in school? And he got the bug. And to cut an extremely long story short, he sold his publishing rights to his music. He bought a farm. He embarked upon a series of many, many years of trials of how to grow in a way that supports soil biology and improves soil rather than extractive farming behavior of conventional farming or even standard organic farming. And then when he managed to grow these crops in a way that that did support and improve soil biology, he found by taking it to the market that the market doesn't care, because markets are by definition completely fungible, commoditized products. And so to extract that extra bit of value was where I came on board and said, I think we should set up a business whereby started with a little bakery in France, and now today it's a flour and food business where we are empowering customers to become part of the solution by buying these products.
Would you mind just explaining a little bit about how the crop is different to traditional farming?
Yeah, so one of Andy's light bulb moments was when he came across a book, a very old book by a guy called Albert Howard, which is an agricultural testament. And if you only ever read one book about farming, we say it should be that. But the name of the game is diversity, basically, which is how we created food for millennia. And it's when we start separating these plants out into monocrops and removing animals from the fields is when a lot of the problems come in. And that's when soil biology is getting eroded, and that's the road that we've been on. We sped up a lot in the last 70 years with a big agriculture and chemical-based agriculture.
So obviously, having a more diverse crop has an impact on soil health. Is that quite well understood?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It's a thing that I don't think is well understood. I didn't, as you said at the beginning, I was part of the urban population that consumes food and is completely divorced from where it's grown and how it's grown. But I think within farming, it's known. Even the classic organic farming is you put fertility builders down for a few years and then cash the crop in. Whereas
Mhm.
actually, what we're trying to do is create the circumstance in the field where you don't have to build fertility and cash it in. As
Yeah.
such, you can have a perennial system that 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 can feed us year in year out, rather than a tonnage based system, which is one of the main problems is we measure everything in tons rather than in what's actually the quality of the product that's coming out of the field.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, I can
So no, I
understand.
think soil biology is not understood. One of our advisors is a guy called John Crawford, who's one of the world's leading soil scientists. And he has a beautiful quote where he says, 10 years ago, I think I understood 0.1% about soil. And now I think I understand 0.01% about soil. And he will demonstrate that we know more about outer space than we know about how soil works. But what we are observing is, and there's been a lot more talk about these days, is fungal networks under the ground, mycelium networks, these kind of
Yeah.
things. And there's an awful lot of similarities with like gut microbiome, and I guess you know as much about more about this than I do, probably, Mel. But ultimately, soil contains what the plants need to feed it, but the
Mhm.
biology has to be working correctly in the soil for the plant to be able to access all the nutrients and minerals within it.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. No, I get that. I mean, it's fascinating both what happens in the soil and also in the plants themselves.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's much study being done just on the flip side of that? So obviously there's the soil health impact, but also there's the plant health and the nutritional profile
Mm.
impact as well. Is there much data on the improvement in the nutritional profile of the ingredients you produce?
Yeah, definitely not enough, and it's an area that I want to work more on. We are working with what we're doing on the plants themselves is we're doing a lot of sap analysis to say
Mhm.
that these will tell us what the plant is getting from the soil. Because a lot of the time, if a plant doesn't look very healthy, farmers will just stick a load of nitrogen on, like an insane amount of nitrogen on, and get the plant to grow more above the ground. But then quite often you'll pull that plant out of the ground and it'll have completely clean roots. So it's
Yeah.
not accessing anything from the soil. We have one of the farms we work with that I'm actually at today. They did a sap analysis on, and the nitrogen was absolutely abundant, but was short on boron and a bit short on manganese. And these are things that I think people are only just starting to talk about. What are the things we can do? Andy's first farm in France, he spent many, many, many years putting a huge diversity of different crops down and grazing it with animals. And
Mhm.
that's for sure the natural nature's way of doing it. But if we need to transition more quickly, and we can use some of the foliar sprays that are around today that are absolutely, the seaweed sprays and compost sprays, to be fair, uh,
Mm.
from organic sources, and then I think this is a thing we need to be talking much more about, and then we can start really getting into what's the nutrition from one crop to the next, because going back to these fungible markets, one tomato is not equal to another tomato. I think there's
No.
going to be much more focus on how it was grown, what was done to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the whole, particularly when it comes down to micronutrients, so things like vitamins and minerals. Um, there's an increasing focus on moving from the bad old days, if I can say this, of just sort of adding extra micronutrients into food to pump them up a bit. Doing it naturally is very much where the market is and is going.
100%, 100%.
And not just sticking a plant in a pot that's got extra potassium in it just so you can have some out the other end.
You're right.
Um, it's very
Definitely.
much about doing it the right way. Um,
Well, and in systems that are balanced systems.
yeah,
This isn't come out of some um, like luddite hippy dippy, or I'm anti technology. This is this the way we're farming means that we are going to reach terminal soil depletion in 60 years. Some people say less, and
wow.
we won't be able to feed ourselves anymore. So I'd say at the root of all this is a food security question, and that's a couple of sides to that coin. Can we continue feeding ourselves, and also can we continue feeding ourselves in fully transparent, traceable, um, decentralized food network, or are we going to be remain dependent on completely anonymous commoditized markets where we don't know where the grain's coming from or what's being done to it. All we know is that it's hit a certain protein score. And
Mm.
again, in very sad circumstances, there's been a massive light shone on that in the last, sort of 8 weeks with all the sad situation that's happening in the Ukraine, where
Yeah.
a vast number of people who are technically our competitors, who
Yes.
might sell themselves as like some how do I say, like bucolic image of an Italian mill, but actually they're buying their grain in the Ukraine, and we've all seen what's happened to wheat prices. They've gone through the roof in recent time because no one knows where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't
Absolutely.
know what you're eating, how it's being grown, or if you realistically can assume you can continue buying it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's sounds like the ultimate answer just to sustainability.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, are you aware around the world how much effort's being put into wild farming?
Yeah, I mean, wild farmed is a term that we came up with just because we like the juxtaposition of nature is wild and then farming is clearly the antithesis of it. But
Change.
regenerative agriculture is really, there's some fantastic people doing a lot of stuff all around the world. We're just one set of people with one set of ideas. And we definitely don't pretend to have the last word in any of it. But what it is at the moment is it's niche and disparate. And I
Mm.
think a customer needs something that is unified and easy to understand. And that's what we spend a huge amount of our time doing. And we've been an ingredient business since the beginning, and we're now starting to become a food business. So we're opening, our own production units. And I think as we saw with the rise of the sort of of the alt meat business, consumers will get behind a simple, easy to understand message. And I think a very natural move on from veganism is, and apologies for this term in advance, but is the climatarian in the Gen Z
Yeah.
conscious
Oh,
consumer.
perfect.
And I think if we're going to eat less meat, we're going to eat more crops. What crops? How they're grown? What does it say about me? The implication of me eating these. And I think just having a sustainable system is not going to be enough. Because we naturally eating food and the whole farming thing is extractive. So we're all
Mm.
in an extractive business here. So I think we need to think about how can we make that regenerative.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Are you seeing much pull from consumers into this way of farming, or is it more being driven by farmers and producers at the moment?
No, that's an interesting one. We definitely are. Like our original sort of classic target base was the artisan bakery community, who they understand this. They love the product, and the very high end restaurants, and they are, because then what's really important is they love the flavor of it. This isn't some worthy. Um, oh, I'm only just doing it because it's good for me. We all know in food it's got to taste good, and it
Mm.
was led by people who really understand that things that are grown this way have a quality to them. In the same way that I don't think foraging would be a thing if there wasn't some deep understanding that nature could do things in a way that it's very difficult for humans to repeat.
Yeah.
So, so the pull has been coming from the community of artisans, definitely. But what's more interesting now is the move into much bigger businesses. So we've recently signed a contract with one of the biggest supermarkets in the world on loaf in every brand from Q4. And the problem we're solving for these guys is that we're helping them reduce their extractive behavior from within their supply chain, rather than just going and planting a load of eucalyptus trees in the Never Never and saying you've got a carbon sinking XYZ.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Well, that's quite interesting. And at the moment, there's always cost implications to these
Mm.
things. What does this look like compared to conventional products? Is it a premium offering at the moment?
Yes, it is a premium offering. But the interesting thing about the unit economics of baked goods is the flour tends to be the cheapest product in it,
Yes.
um, and it tends to be quite a small percentage of the end sale price. So I think, and actually in absolute terms, it's pennies as well, which I know
Yeah.
adds up in terms of margins, but it's not like dealing in meat where the percentages are much more significant. So there is a small premium that we found people being able to pass it on very easily, because, as I said before, flour is absolutely cheap and it's a small percentage of it. And I think the conscious consumer again is happy to vote that way. I
Yeah.
think that it's an interesting way for people to express um, who they want to be and what systems they want to support.
Yeah, now that's really good to hear. Actually, as a product developer, we always have about 6 hats on when we're developing products. It's we've got an array of ingredients we could use. What do we want to use? What's going to resonate with the customer? Can we afford them?
Yeah,
And actually, if the potential on cost is minimal for a potentially better sensory experience and a sustainable experience, then that's fantastic.
is why it's been important for us to go down the brand route. And this touched on a couple of questions ago you asked me, which is there's many farmers doing interesting things, but the customers don't know about it. So we spend a huge amount of time making noise. We made a silly film about the story about bread, and we're trying very hard to make it very clear which system do you want to support, and a brand is very useful for that. We've seen brands on products, all sorts of products that customers have got interested in. Kids really care about an Airtex T-shirt with a specific label on it, and we know they care a lot about sneakers and what have you. So I think which food choices you make are important, and having a brand around a regenerative business, I think, is a really well, it's the lever that we've chosen to pull to approach it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I was gonna just touch on scalability, actually. I mean,
Mm.
the fact that you're talking to a big supermarket sort of makes a statement for its own. But I think I read
Mhm.
that you've got about 40 farmers at the moment growing under
Yeah,
contract with Wild Farmed.
yeah, we do. We've got 40 farmers growing under protocols that are our wild farm protocols across the UK, and a small number in France still, from where Andy started his journey.
Hmm.
Um, to give you an idea of scale, we've got on wait list 75,000 um, acres of land of growers that want to come and grow with us, which I think is about 1%. Sorry, it's about 10% of the arable land in the UK.
Wow.
And if we're balancing supply and demand with obviously between a year to 18 month time lag normally.
Yes.
So big supermarkets coming on. I'm at the farm here today with with the team, including the owner of one of the biggest fast casual restaurant chains in the UK. And the exact comment I've just been having to that guy is, you can make huge impact. We can unlock these farmland if you're buying the flour. And then the next step down for us when we go into the consumer goods, it'll be the same to the consumer on the street. That's the empowering message. We can all listen to Greta or watch David Attenborough and feel a bit hopeless and that we can't do anything about it. And our message is an empowering one, a hopeful one, which is just buy this one rather than this one, and you can be part of part of the solution.
Yeah, that's amazing. How does the relationship work with all the different farmers?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. I mean, as far as the business side of it goes, we agree a very fair price with them. It's a premium product, so we can afford to pay a premium price to the farmers
Right.
before a growing season. So we're doing a bunch of agreements now. It is April for grain that will be sown this autumn and the following spring, that will harvest the following July, August.
Hmm.
And they will grow for us under contract, but it's all bilateral contracts. And then what we're doing is very important, is we're building a community. It's not just a supplier relationship. We're talking about what's your experiences, because we don't pretend to have all the answers, and nobody does. But shared experience and community building is something that we found the farms are really interested in, which we're doing a series of open days at all of the different farms. One of our farms is being featured on Spring Watch and Winter Watch and what have you.
Right.
We had a very well-known TV personality who has a farming show. He used to have a car show, come down the other week, and was very excited about being part of it because of the community element to
Mm.
to what we're doing. So I think that's a big part of it. See, the business side is, this whole thing's rooted in paying farmers fairly. When I got involved with Andy, as you said at the beginning, my background's finance, and
Yes.
what I couldn't understand about farming was conventional farming is, people go in at the beginning of the year to make a product with no idea how much it's going to cost them, because they don't know what the fertilizers and the fuel's going to cost them, and they don't know how much they're going to sell it for at the end. It's like the worst business in the world. I would never enter into it. So we tried to reduce a lot of, and in farming, then you've got the weather, of course. So we tried to reduce a lot of the sort of known unknowns, and make it as predictable as possible. Because our system has no inputs, no chemicals ever, it's you know how much it's going to cost you to produce the product, and then you know how much you can sell it for at the end. So, God willing, on the weather a little bit, we're trying to reduce a bit of uncertainty in the whole thing. So getting farmers on board has not been tricky for us. And while the whole thing's rooted in, we treat this community of people very well, we talk about them a lot, and we champion them, I don't think we're going to struggle with that side of things.
No, that's amazing. What's in can you just explain a little bit about what's in your product range at the moment?
I'm not the best person to answer that, but but it's a range of flowers. It's a range of flowers that we do. There's everything stone ground. It's all we grow wheat, all different types of wheat, in a variety of farms up and down the UK. And I say there's a legacy couple in France who are Andy's old neighbours. It all gets milled at the same place, but we have bread flours, we have pizza flour, we have cake flour, we have patisserie flour, and now we're just making early baby steps into being able to sell bread to people. So a lot of people have said, we want to support the project. What you guys are doing is great, but we don't use a lot of flour. We buy everything in. So now we're selling bread to people. We've been very fortunate that people have made pasta products for us and noodle products for us and bao buns and all sorts of stuff. So we're getting into this bit where we're not doing all the manufacturing ourselves yet. But we're getting into being a food business, like a B2B food business.
Okay, so that's amazing. So if anyone watching our webinar either today or from recording later wants to contact you and in order to buy the flowers, what's the best way?
Contact me and I'll put you onto my amazing commercial team, because they are much smarter than me. But my email is ed, and it's EDD @wildfarmed.co.uk. We'd be delighted to sell people flour.
Amazing. What are the plans for extending the product range and scaling up?
So we are, as I touched upon, we are building our own production unit, which is going to be a combination of like a Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, come Apple Store, come Nike Town, of what's Wild Farmed all about. Because we have all these beautiful images of healthy soil and less healthy soil, and then putting tasty things in your mouth. So we're in the process of just figuring out the final details of that, but that will be done this year. And then from there, because one of the benefits we have with our product is that the emerging best in class in the London sort of food scene are attracted to it. So we have, we did a lot of work with Willie's Pies at the beginning. We're doing it, like I say, with the ramen noodles, the bao buns, Pizza Pilgrims in Selfridges, which is Britain's most sustainable pizza restaurant. They've got every single detail in there. They've made the chairs out of pineapple residue. They've using our flour, obviously. They've got vertical farm basil. I think the tomatoes they struggled with, but the cheese is from a UK supplier.
Okay.
And so the product range will be B2B, all sorts of different things, and B2C later this year. Like I say, baked goods and anything you can make wheat out of. And actually, I didn't go, but the rest of the team yesterday went down to Gypsy Hill, where they're making a beer out of the Wild Farm. So we're doing an awful lot of collaborations with other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds absolutely amazing. Question here from Kevin Deep. As farming's totally dependent on the weather, in the case of crop failure, how do you bear with the loss? Is it passed on to the customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do our best to spread our risk. So we, in the UK, we are growing from Cumbria down to Cornwall, and we the system by definition is how do I say it, is more versatile and more resistant to weather shocks than a conventional system would be. But if it snows in May, like everyone else, we're going to have a problem. So, but we have fixed prices, so that that the price will be the price. We'll just have a significantly lower yield that year.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. To be honest, I always have a few people in advance of the webinars in the week that potentially can't join asking me questions. So I've spent some time this week explaining why it's a healthier population. So yeah, okay. Well, hopefully that answers your question, Kevin Deep. All right, it's we're just coming up to past. If massive thanks, Ed, for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's always lovely to talk to you.
And we've put links to Wild Farm in the chat. If you want to contact us, you can do so directly. If you have questions, we can we can forward them to Ed, or you can contact Ed directly if you need help. So yeah, thank you ever so much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. If you've got a question about your product development, you can always contact us via the website www.froghop.co.uk. You can book a free of charge introductory call at www.froghop.co.uk/meet. You'll find a wealth of free resources for starting, developing and scaling your food or drink product and business at www.froghop.co.uk/resources.